We made it 1 year on YouTube, and it's been quite a year. A year in which I've challenged myself to drink a lot of things that this sounds a little ridiculous, but a lot of things that I didn't normally drink. Like the whole 18-year-old single malt review series that we did, official bottlings. I just bought a lot of bottles that I had chosen to kind of pass up on in my journey. And I've really drank a lot more official bottlings, a lot less single barrels, independent bottlings, although those are still certainly some of my favorite whiskeys. But when you want to talk about whiskey and you want to connect with people outside of your little circle, you've got to talk about things that they can drink. And it's been a little different than I had originally anticipated, but we're here a year later. I'm a little bit better at, I think, talking into the microphone and whatnot, although I don't know if I've really figured out the whole YouTube thing just quite yet. But we're going to celebrate a little bit with a bottle that has challenged me maybe at least as much as YouTube, although I think I've figured out the whiskey a little bit better than even YouTube. But we're going to talk about the Craigellachie 23-year-old. Let's get to it. Welcome to Whiskey Uncorked, everyone. My name is Brian. And yes, we have hit 1 year here on YouTube. And it's been quite the journey for me. I don't know if I've ever really truly said this on any sort of video, but this is completely out of my personal comfort zone. I am not a social media person. I don't engage in chats. I have general anxiety and all that sort of thing, social anxiety. So even just creating a YouTube channel and sticking with it for a whole year is it's pretty big for myself, and I don't really want to stop doing it. It has been fun. It's been challenging, all the new skills that I've learned over the last year plus, and just even the growth that I've seen in myself in terms of talking into the camera and whatnot. It definitely feels a little bit better, a little bit more natural, although I don't know if it'll ever feel truly just part of my nature. But thank you to all of you who have been around and watching my videos over the last 12 months. I really do appreciate it. I know that Scotch whiskey on YouTube is really small, and even the reason I have this channel and the reason why I even kind of challenged myself to even do this is there's just not a lot of there's a lot of people reviewing whiskey and that sort of thing, but I just felt there was room for something a little bit more. And you guys have all indulged me, and I've gotten a lot of comments in under my videos about videos being too long or get to the point and that sort of thing. But I've really wanted to stick with this idea of I'm just kind of a guy drinking whiskey, and this is like we were all just sitting around with a bunch of friends at a bottle share, and I'm giving my thoughts. And although I wouldn't talk that much as I do, I definitely wouldn't make it to 15 minutes, 18 minutes of just bloviating about one particular whiskey. But I just wanted it to be more conversational and a little bit more in depth, and just talk and just to get some feedback from you all. Make sure I'm not always that I'm not crazy. And obviously, we're not going to always agree on which whiskeys are best or which ones we love and which ones maybe we feel just haven't really clicked with us yet. But it's been really great to hear all the positive feedback and how many of you at least do have an understanding of my journey, because I am still somewhat early. Really just 5 years of serious whiskey drinking, which seems like a long time. And I thought by the time I would be here, I'd know everything there could be to know about whiskey, particularly Scotch whiskey. And I'm still discovering official bottlings and things like that. So that was definitely an overestimation of my own abilities. My palate is constantly changing, and this is part of my journey. And if you've spent any time watching these videos, if you've left comments below, whether you were thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever it was, I do appreciate that, as it's been quite the year. But enough about that. Why don't we talk about this whiskey that I've got sitting here? A 23-year-old Craigellachie. This is not the most recent release. They just did a release of this. I believe it was in 2023 was maybe the official when it was bottled. I think it hit here in the States sometime this year. As far as I can tell, this was actually bottled in 2014. I bought it in 2020. I didn't realize it was bottled that long ago, but this is batch 67 KA23. This is a 750 milliliter bottle for the US. The laser code is L16111ZA900. It was really difficult to find anything specific for that bottle code. Really, the only thing that came up when I searched specifically that bottle code is an old whiskey mystery video where they did a lineup of Craigellachie's. So if you want a second opinion, and for sure this is the exact same thing, check that out. Although this code does come up on Whiskey Base. So, but I bought this in 2020, and I got a great deal on it. At that point in time, these were selling for about $300, maybe a little less at most stores. And there was a store that had multiple bottles for $200. And I was like, well, if I'm ever going to buy one, now's the time. And at least at this point, I obviously were probably, as many of you would probably agree, regret not buying them out, even if that meant not buying whiskey for a few months or whatever, because this is probably about $500 in the US after tax. That should probably be a fairly fair price. If you got the most recent edition, these can sell for quite a bit on auction and things like that. So definitely at $200, probably the best deal I could possibly have hoped for a bottle like this. Regrets aside, I did open this probably sometime last year in 2023, so I held on to it for a little while. And frankly, it's been challenging. Like, I've wanted to review this basically since I started the channel. I don't remember if I opened it specifically with the idea of reviewing it or not, but this was challenging for me. I didn't quite get it. I didn't love it. I've never heard anyone say a bad word about Craigellachie 23. And I was like, man, I love the 13-year-old. I was a big fan of the 13-year-old. I had a bottle of the 17, although that was drank under non-traditional circumstances. It was up in the woods of Canada fishing, so didn't maybe appreciate that one quite as much. But have had a number of Craigellachie's over the years, and as a Worm Tub Distillery, definitely just one of my favorites, I guess. Neglected favorite. I probably don't go back to it as much as I should for one reason or the other. It's just so much to try and drink, so you got to make your choices. And Craigellachie hasn't been the most ignored, but maybe hasn't gotten quite the attention it deserves. But this bottle, I spent basically the last year having sporadic pours of this, and just like, there's something about it that I wasn't quite sure about, and it just wasn't clicking for me until pretty recently, which is why I decided that this was a good time with the 1-year anniversary and everything to finally break this thing out and do a review. Because I don't know if I have it completely solved, but man, the last couple of pours of this have been stunning. So this bottle is 46% ABV. It is non-chill filtered. It's natural color. It's probably a mixture of barrels. Although I will say it drinks, again, it's one of these kind of mixtures that tries to walk that line. It's definitely not a sherry bomb. It definitely kind of leans bourbon cask for me, at least in my mind, but it is probably a blend of some sherry. Again, its retail price here in the US is probably somewhere between $450, $480, I think is what I've seen it for. If you've probably up to $500 plus tax. If you're paying any more than that, you can argue you're already kind of getting the shaft at that price for a whiskey like this. But it's it's difficult. I wish it was cheaper. I think that $300 price point today would be more reasonable, although obviously still extremely expensive. But if this was $300 back in 2020, guess it's not surprising that we've already seen that thing climb up to about $500 here. So let's get into the nosing and tasting notes and give this thing a score. I normally write down some notes for, prior to doing these, and I just felt like this was, when I really stopped and focused on it, when I finally got it, that it was just more, like, just the discovery of it was too much to, like, stop and write notes and that sort of thing, and I just kind of decided I was going to do it a little bit off the cuff here on the video instead of having at least some backups, so my palate maybe wasn't 100% today, or my nose. But yeah, so this is basically going to kind of be off the top and maybe just a few recollections of what I experienced. But this was definitely something that I decided that I wasn't going to kind of interrupt, and that I was going to just enjoy the dram on its own merits. But let's see what it's smelling and tasting like today. Here we go. So I think my general impression of this has been, it's a very kind of apple dram. It's baked apples, I believe. And then those worm tubs are subtle. It's maybe a little waxy, a little dirty. I think the bottle mentions like sulfury. Yeah, we have stubbornly maintained the methods that make our whiskey so distinctive. It's why we're one of the very few distilleries that still use worm tubs to cool the spirit from the stills, that bestow it with extra flavors of strong sulfury nature and help to create a gutsy dram that rivals whiskeys twice its age. That says a lot about a 23-year-old whiskey to say that it rivals something that's 46 years old. I don't know if that's something you can objectively measure, because once you hit that kind of 20, 25-year-old age, the differences are so subtle the older you get that I don't know. But the sulfury character is not something that I'm sensitive to. I do pick things up as being a little bit more meaty or very herbal or something like that, but the sulfury flavors are not something that I kind of call out in my tasting notes much, because I've been to like hot springs and like Yellowstone and that sort of thing, and like smelled like the earthly sulfur and the sort of thing, and I've just never gotten that kind of experience from whiskey. So if you're sensitive to sulfur, this is one of those that probably try it first if you can, or if you've had the Craigellachie 13, it's probably gonna be more intense on that anyway. So start there. If you like the Craigellachie 13, this will probably be something that interests you. But on the nose, baked apples, maltiness, and yet has not lost the spirit character. That's why I don't think, they certainly didn't go heavy with the sherry casks here. We're at 23 years old. I'm looking for maybe some more, leather, tobacco. It's fairly clean, but there's a weight to it. There's a density. It just, you can kind of feel it just kind of sitting there in the glass. Like you can smell it, but it's not like jumping out, but it's just weighty. It's hard to explain unless you're a whiskey drinker and you're someone that's spent a lot of, you're not a beginner. It's something that you probably understand what I'm saying. Maybe there's a better way to describe it, but that's kind of the best I can do at this point. There's a slight woodiness, and if there is any age, it's a little touch of that wood varnish that you get on older whiskeys sometimes. It's really pleasant. It's not doing anything that, at least for me, that is weird. It's actually kind of surprisingly fresh when you consider like even the tasting notes of like sulfury notes and worm tubs and that sort of thing. It's just really something that I think you expect to be extremely flavorful. The nose is layered. I think you can dig in this for a while. You can probably find new things. There's probably 100 different word combinations you can use to describe things, but I generally think that this is actually a fairly readable whiskey. It's not something that's going to turn a ton of people off, and unless maybe you are sensitive to that sulfur. There's a little bit of brightness coming through now, a little bit of lemon. But yeah, it's a really nice nose. I don't know if that part is clicked for me yet, if other people feel that there's more to this nose than that. This just smells really good, and it smells like it's going to taste good. So why don't we stop delaying that part of it and give this thing a sip and see how it's tasting today. Cheers. There's this like gentle sweetness on the front of the palate, and then the experience I'm going to talk about most in this whiskey hits, and it's something that kind of confounded me for a little while, but I'll get to that in a second. So that apple is there, like it's honeys and apple, like fresh red apples, and then there's just that worm tub quality is there. That slight waxiness, that slight just heft that just kind of sits on your tongue and sticks to the roof of your palate. Everything's just really in sync. It's just a very, I mean, surprisingly elegant whiskey if you've drank a lot of Craigellachie's that can be, especially from some of these independent bottlers. My best experiences with Craigellachie have been from the official bottlings, other than a bottle that I just opened, which is a Thompson Brothers 13-year-old Craigellachie, which is the 13 on steroids. It's so good, but they left it alone. But you get these heavily cask finished Craigellachie's. I just haven't had one that's clicked yet. Even some of the heavily sherried, like the exceptional casks from Craigellachie, have been odd or a little rough around the edges, even despite their ages. So, but there's one thing that I wanted to talk about. This is an instance where I felt so dumb, like once I figured out what was happening. But when I would drink this whiskey, I would get this sensation of like it being, like, I've come to learn fizzy whiskeys that kind of have that sensation of like drinking like a soda or like a, carbonated water or something. It just kind of has, it's almost salty, but it's a little different. It just has like a little bit more life to it. And Loch Lomond, which I've talked about in the 12-year-old review that I did a couple weeks ago, was probably, I'm like, oh, that's what they mean when people say fizzy. It was a single barrel cask strength, but this was something that was different. This reminded me of like, in my mind, Diet Dr. Pepper was always like overcarbonated. When I would drink it, it would just feel like my mouth was like full of like foam. Like if you get a beer that has too much foam on the top of it and you try to drink it and you just have a mouthful of foam, and there's like a very distinct like sensation that like I was never a fan of, and it almost felt like that with this, and it was just weird. I'm like, what's doing that? And this is where I'm dumb, because I sat down, I'm like, what's actually happening here? Like, what's that sensation? It like literally feels like my mouth is foaming up. And I realized fairly recently that I was salivating so much after taking a sip of this that I was like almost on the brink of like drooling. Like, it was just like, I couldn't believe that I didn't realize that was what was going on. But once it clicked, I'm like, oh my God, that's what's happening. I'm like literally like can't keep up. And I've like, food has never even done that to me. So I'm gonna do a second sip, and if there's a little bit of a pause there to try to get it under control, I can still feel like the effects of it. Because when I talk like this, like, mouth actually gets a little dry. So It's definitely a little change of pace. Let's go in for the second sip, see if I can pick out anything else, and yeah, we'll think about giving this a score. Cheers. The gentle, dense sweetness up front. There it is. It gets into kind of a little bit apple and pastry and a little salty. And then it gets in the worm tub, like almost kind of, it's like a grain whiskey that's young, that's just been sanded down to a perfect polish. It's like the same flavor. I'm literally like spitting into the microphone because of the salivation, like, which is, I've never in my life had something that's done that to me. So tell me in the comments if I'm the only one. Like, I've had whiskeys that have made me kind of mouthwater, but this is like to another level. It was weird, and it's almost an inconvenience. But it's actually kind of wild. But yeah, that kind of grain quality, like the spirit is there. This is probably sherry cask in here. There's a little hint of red fruit, like a little bit of just subtle strawberry, like dried strawberries or something. Just a little kiss of it. The finish lasts forever. Decent mouthfeel, not super oily. I think on the front it had a bit of a silky texture, when like just the gentle sweetness is almost like astonishing on the front, because it's so, like, you would not think it was whiskey. It's just this kind of like emulsified honey and vanilla or something like that, and a bit of a silky texture there on the front. And then when you swallow it, it kind of, you kind of get the fizz, you get the saltiness, like you get the little bit of bite, not from the ABV, it's not really from the ABV though, and then it kind of just turns into Craigellachie, but gentle, integrated, all the things you'd want from a 23-year-old Scotch whiskey. So man, this thing is becoming a favorite bottle of mine. I struggled with this one. I'll be the first one to admit that. I'm almost halfway through the bottle now with this whiskey here. I've had just a few in the last week or two to try to figure this thing out. I'm getting there. So the review, giving this thing a score is feels a little bit unfair to it. Because I think there's probably more here. I think this is a whiskey that seems simple on its surface, but there's something that's challenging about it, and I'm appreciating that journey. In terms of a score, right, this is kind of 8 or 9 range. This is an extremely good whiskey even at this point. I think it's doing something unique for me. The flavors themselves are really good. I think if it was just the flavors, it would just be more of an 8, but just kind of the attention grabbing sensations that this thing provides, the transition from that kind of silky sweet front of the palate into the grip and just kind of fizz of the second half, and then just like the flood of just literally salivation, like trying to stop myself from drooling, especially when I'm talking into a camera. Like, that counts for something. It's an experience that I'm happy I've had. I don't know if that's anything that can translate to another person, if that's going to be a very uniquely me thing. But yeah, I'm going to give this thing a 9 out of 10 based on just the crazy sensation transitions, and really challenging me to stop and pay attention to what was actually happening, and actually kind of making me feel a little foolish, like not realizing like what was going on, and just chalking it up to, oh, I don't get it. But value wise, $500 a bottle. Is this a $500 bottle of whiskey? It's a really good bottle. Again, like I've talked about the few times that I've reviewed bottles that are kind of approaching that price. I was at $200. Yeah, you buy it every single day. There probably wouldn't be a better value in Scotch at $200. At 500, or the equivalent, in British pounds or euros or whatnot. 500. If you are comfortable spending $500 on a bottle of whiskey, I would say have this on your list. And if you know you love Craigellachie, then it's probably going to be worth it. But it's a little different in the sense that I didn't find the flavors themselves to be this like crazy layered evolution. It was much more focused on the sensations and just almost distracting you from the flavor. Like I could probably talk for another 15 minutes trying to figure out exactly what to say about this thing, but value wise, it's a $500 bottle. If you can afford it, have at it. If $500 is just way out of your price range, trust me, I get it. Try to find a friend, try to find a bar, a special occasion, maybe splurge for a dram of this if you can. But yeah, it's $500 a bottle. If you can afford it, buy it. If not, what are you gonna do? Anyways, that'll wrap it up for me. I don't think there's too much else to say. Again, thank you again so much for 1 year here on YouTube. We've hit the 500 subs. We've on the march towards 600 one of these days. I'm going to get on a live stream. I'll figure that out and just kind of maybe get to talk to some of you all live. But, until then, thank you so much for watching. Until next week, we'll be here with another whiskey review. Cheers.